Good morning. Welcome to the month of June. It's a new month here. And congratulations to the champions of Europe. Over the weekend, it was quite a time. It was quite interesting. Unfortunately, whilst there is celebrating, it does seem like there'll be some measure of sadness here as the strike by the NLC and the TUC Organized Labour begins today. I am Olive Emodi, and I welcome you to Breakfast Central.
And I am Osaogi Ogbawan. Yes, of course, welcome to a Monday morning on Breakfast Central. We have, of course, the next 2 hours to share some of the major conversations happening in Nigeria across, current affairs and, of course, bits and pieces in other parts of the continent. Remember, you could always join us via our social media platforms at News Central TV, or share your thoughts with us via our phone lines, sometime in the 8 o'clock hour. We also have Dashin Usman joining us with Breakfast Headlines. Good morning, Dashin.
Good morning, Osaogi. Good morning, Olive.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Of course, it's NLC strike, that is starting off today. I was expecting that they would meet, in the middle somewhere with the deliberations that they had yesterday with the Senate President and others who stepped in, but apparently that doesn't seem to have worked. There's many people who have also criticized the demands that they have, about 400,000 naira minimum wage and, of course, the increase in electricity tariff, amongst other things. How long do you think this particular strike would last, looking at precedents with former NLC or previous NLC strike actions?
Well, I really don't think it will last too long. And it's actually been a while since, a strike by the NLC has actually changed the government's mind. Let's just hope that, for the fear of crippling the economy, that this particular strike actually works on the government. Now, while some people would actually say that, 400,000 naira is quite much, and just as you actually said, you're thinking that they would actually meet somewhere in the middle. I don't think 200,000 naira or 250,000 naira is too much for a civil servant to actually, get paid at the end of the month, because I actually feel like, a government that is ready to remove subsidy, which has actually cushioned the effect of, high cost of living for so many people in the country, should also be ready to face the consequences that actually come with it. And 250K is not, too much, but 60,000 naira, I would actually say that's actually a wicked thing to do to civil servants, a wicked amount to actually give to them. Because where would that take them, especially if you're father of, let's say, 5 or even 6 children? What would you do when it comes to transportation, feeding, school fees? Yes, with the student loan, but then you would also have to pay up the student loan, in time. So 60,000 naira is just too small.
Well,
I mean, I agree, that Nigerians would, deserve more than 60,000 naira minimum wage. You could have that argument, but, who can afford 200,000 naira minimum wage? You understand that this means that as the government, of course, civil servants start to earn more, so, of course, does the average, Nigerian who works in the private sector. You then have to pay, your security guards, you have to pay your hairdressers, everybody has to have, a massive increment in their, salaries also. And Nigerians currently would not be able to afford that. Like, there has to be a massive shift in earning power for Nigerian businesses to be able to afford that level of, minimum wage. So there's a lot, that needs to go into, these deliberations. And also, can the federal government even afford 200,000 or 250,000 naira minimum wage? Is another question that should be asked. And this is not defending the government or creating excuses for them. I just feel like there's many, of these questions that need to be deliberated upon when they have these meetings. And unfortunately, looking back at previous NLC strikes, nobody, like I said earlier, is expecting that this would go very far. No one expects that this would go beyond Tuesday. I, had a conversation yesterday. I was saying that max Tuesday, they're going to have, some deliberation that, of course, would have them calling off the strike and everybody returns to status quo, because all efforts by the NLC, like you mentioned, have never really got the federal government to, change its stance on anything or take any positive actions, that have benefited Nigerians in at least the last 5, 6, maybe in the last 10 years. We've not seen the NLC's action bring forth any positive change for the Nigerian people. So no one's expecting that this would be different. But there needs to be some level of openness from the federal government side and from the NLC side, so we understand what exactly we're battling with and what is possible. What changes are possible to be made with regards to minimum wage. What can the federal government afford? What can states afford? states are still struggling with 30,000 naira minimum wage.
Some states have not even
But that is not because it is impossible. It is because these states are lazy, in my opinion, lazy. And they've not been able to look at other ways to generate income for themselves. A lot of them are still reliant on federal government allocation every month.
So there's that angle, and then there's also the angle of what are the other things that the federal government can bring, or the government can ensure that, I mean, if you're not paying them exactly what they're asking for, are you in any way subsidizing the cost of living? Are you maybe ensuring that they get access to healthcare, or they get access to subsidized, amount for their transportation? So there are other things that can be added that are not necessarily cash to ensure that you balance things out. And it's not the most comfortable scenario to say that you can't afford it, especially when they see that this government is living a lavish lifestyle. Even though, I mean, cutting down the lifestyle is a first step. If you are going to say that you cannot pay, okay, cut down your lifestyle, then they will feel like, okay, we are all together in this. But it's a conversation we'll look deeper into, Dashin. But thank you for lending your thoughts. We'll have you bring us breakfast headlines.
Hello and welcome to Breakfast Headlines. I'm Darshan Usman. Now let's begin by telling you that the leadership of the National Assembly met with the organized labor in Abuja in a bid to avert an imminent indefinite strike by the labor unions. The meeting, which was held in the National Assembly complex, is presided over by the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, with the Speaker, House of Representatives, Tajudeen Abbas, in attendance. The National Assembly said the meeting was to avert the impending industrial action to commence on Monday, June 3rd, 2024, which would have severe repercussions on the populace and the economy.
I don't want us to, in the course of trying to arrive at minimum wage, we end up with a lot of, serious issues of unemployment. Because as soon as we arrive at a minimum wage, we will expect the private sector to also adhere. And then if they are unable to do so, the next thing will be retrenchment of workers.
There is no two ways about it. But we should also be mindful that the mistakes of several decades cannot be repaired within one day. It is going to be a gradual process. We have to start somewhere and then agree to a plan of what we can do to reach that level where every Nigerian worker can beat his chest and say, I am earning enough to put food on the table.
All the kidnapped students of the Confluence University of Science and Technology, Osara in Kogi State, have been rescued. Now, this is according to State's Commissioner for Information and Communications, Kingsley Fangwa. According to a statement issued on Sunday, Fangwa said the state governor, Usman Ododo, directed full support towards the recovery of the students and their parents, while modalities are being put in place to make Kogi safer for all. 5 persons have been killed with 3 seriously injured following a windstorm that occurred in Bauchi State. The public relations officer of the Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University Teaching Hospital in Bauchi, Abdullahi Kobi, confirmed the casualty figures on Sunday. The injured victims are receiving treatment at the Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University Teaching Hospital in Bauchi. Let's also tell you that a yet-to-be-specified number of people have lost their lives after a trailer lost control and crashed 2 tricycles in Anambra State, southeast Nigeria. On Sunday, the accident occurred at Oba along the Onitsha-Owerri Expressway, Idemili South local government area of Anambra State. It was gathered that the victims were said to be on their way to attend a church service when the accident occurred. Nigerian authorities on Sunday disclosed that 3 officials and a soldier were killed in an ambush in southwest of the country by gunmen who crossed the border from Nigeria. The victims were visiting Diffa, a region that has suffered numerous deadly attacks since 2015, attributed to fighters from Boko Haram and the Islamic State in West Africa. Now, this volatile area lies along the shores of Lake Chad, bordered by Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria. The region's swampy islands have become notorious hideouts for armed terrorist groups. Ivory Coast's former president, Henry Konan Bédié, was laid to rest in his native village 10 months after his death. Delegations representing ethnic groups from all over the country traveled to the eastern village of Pepersau to pay last respects to Bédié, who was commonly known by his initials HKB. Now, since Monday, thousands of mourners have flocked to Pepersau, which usually has a population of several hundreds. Bédié succeeded Ivory Coast's post-colonial founding father, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, as president from 1993 to 1999, when he was overthrown by the military in the country's first ever coup. Now, to updates on the South Africa election, South Africa's governing African National Congress lost its 30-year-old outright majority in this week's election, winning only 159 seats in the 400-seat parliament, official results showed Sunday. President Cyril Ramaphosa and the leaders of most of the rival parties attended the announcement, but in a sign he intends to challenge the results, former President Jacob Zuma stayed away. No single party won a majority in the National Assembly.
Our people have spoken. Whether we like it or not, they have spoken. As the leaders of political parties, as all those who occupied or occupy positions of responsibility in society, we have heard the voices of our people, and we must respect their choices and their wishes. Over the past 30 years, we have strived together to build a country which everyone, black and white, man and woman, young and old, can call home.
And that's all on Breakfast Headlines. Now it's back to Osa and Olive.
Thank you very much. Interesting there, seeing the turn of events in South Africa.
Yeah.
You know, there's, those who would argue that, of course, they expected it to turn out like that. But I'm looking forward to having those conversations today with our South African guest to share exactly what the feelings are like with the ANC. And, of course, what this means, going forward, if this is a complete change in the political tide in South Africa or not.
Most definitely. Now, like you said, a lot of people didn't actually expect, the ANC, after a 3-decade rule, to actually lose out. And, but like, and I love actually how he conceded defeat. He said the people have spoken and it's time to respect their decision. I'm sure if it was in some other countries, there would have been, a lot of back-to-back, petitions, going to court and everything. So,
yeah. Well,
it also brings hope.
Yeah,
it also brings hope to countries where they've had a particular party ruling for years, a party that has become some form of a principality and power. To let you know that you can actually overturn the tide of events and that the voice of the people can actually count. So I applaud the people of South Africa for not feeling dejected, because it's one thing to feel like things are not working out, you don't like the party in power, there's no point going to vote because my vote will not count. So I applaud the people of South Africa for going out to vote, for ensuring that their collective voices were heard.
Olive, you'd actually agree with me that in most cases, the power of incumbency actually works in, most of...
Yeah, but just to clarify, the ANC hasn't, it's not like they've lost the election. They just lost majority of the seats in the 400, seats of parliament. They normally, have majority seats in their parliament. What they've simply lost is that majority, all right? Now there's the DA and, of course, the EFF. The EFF also lost. They normally, would have about 40, I think they used to have about 40 members in the parliament. They've dropped down to about 38. So
what about the MK?
Say that again.
The MK, that's Zuma's party.
I mean, so these are all, different new additions to the conversation concerning South Africa's, political climate, and of course it's elections, which we will need to understand what changed in the last 1 year. Is it, you know, because of the influence of more conversations, you know, concerning South Africa? Is it because of their involvement with the BRICS alignment? Is it because President Cyril Ramaphosa
of the
ANC? Exactly. Has Cyril Ramaphosa also mismanaged the affairs of the country in the last couple of years? Is it maybe also the load sharing? What's it called now?
Load shedding.
Load shedding.
Power.
There's many things, you know, that may have happened that may have led to it. So, you know, but I agree with you. You know, they've held on to, or at least they've had that majority for more than 30 years. This, you know, is an obvious shift, you know, and it definitely means that South Africans are, you know, in need of something else or something fresh. But unfortunately, just like we see in elections in many countries across the world, the other options that you have available for you aren't necessarily better. Unfortunately, and it's the truth across the elections across the world. The whole political climate and the electoral, you know, process is so flawed, and it feels like citizens and the electorate really always have to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea, you know, a lot of times. Same thing going on in the United States, you know, where you have, you know, someone who is, you know, almost, you know, seeming like he has partial dementia, and another person who, of course, is now, you know, a convict, you know, running for elections.
Okay.
So, just to quickly highlight the seat numbers, ANC has 159 seats,
Yes.
DA 87 seats, MK 58 seats, EFF 39 seats, IFP 17 seats, and PA 9 seats. This is a recap of some of the key moments from Sunday. It's very interesting to see how this will play out. This is the number for the biggest parties in the 400-member National Assembly.
Definitely,
Anyway,
yeah.
we'll have you join us again at 9
Thank
a.m.
you.
when you bring us the news. Thank you very much.
Thank
Dash.
you,
See
Olive.
much
Thank you,
later.
sir. Have a wonderful show.
All right.
All right, that's all that we have with the breakfast headlines, breakfast news for this morning. We have more stories to look at. We're going deep into our top stories, and we'd like you to stay with us. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back. Now, education has been described as, by many people rather, as the bedrock of meaningful development in any society. And if education continues to go down the drain, its standard will also be truncated. This was the crux of the event in Kanam local government area of Plateau State, where 2 blocks of classrooms were built and presented to a community that has never had one in its history. News Central's Chizoba Anyowe tells us more.
It is usually said that children are the leaders of tomorrow. Unfortunately, it seems to be mere words on the lips of many people in our society. If not so, how would one understand that governments have come and gone, yet this community has existed for many years without a single classroom? Instead, pupils, or rather children in this case, gather under trees for learning to take place. This is probably what moved the Commissioner for Local Government and Chieftaincy Affairs in Plateau State to pull this stride in this community. Despite blocks of classrooms, he pledged to do more.
Definitely, because we have come up with this structure, we are going to give them uniforms, give them writing materials, give them books. We have done that in the past within the local government, so I am going to give them a lot of books that will aid them in their writing.
Thinking about the partnership where the private and public sectors synergize to improve the standard of education, some residents think it is a step that needs to be harnessed if education will be improved upon in Plateau State.
I'm calling on all sectors, both private, individuals, parents, and even the civil society. We should put our hands together to support the efforts of the government so that education will stand in Nigeria, will stand in Plateau State.
If the people can cooperate with the government, I think the time is now. I advise the people to cooperate with government so as to see how we move the state forward in terms of education.
We also use the medium to call on the suburb to come to our aid by completing the remaining 4 classrooms with office to us. And if possible, if there is facility on ground, they should assist us, because right now you can see the primary school, there's no seat, no blackboard and other facilities that the student need it.
Pledging to furnish the new classrooms, the chairman of Suburb on the Plateau says this intervention would aid in reducing the number of out-of-school children in the state.
Certainly, we have out-of-school cases of out-of-school children in Plateau State. And through such interventions, we'll be able to bring down the number. You know, we cannot eradicate it completely, but at least through such intervention, we'll be able to trim down the number. And that is what we're working on. That's the goal.
Surely, the joys of these pupils will not be complete if these new classrooms remain empty without any form of furniture or learning aids until the words of these stakeholders materialize into actions. In Jos for News Central, Chizoba Anyui.
All right, very interesting conversation there. Of course, you know, seeing what's going on with the school that has just been built in Plateau State. Disappointing, actually. Seeing that, you know, a local government or, you know, part of Plateau State, you know, that has never had a school, if you're going to report, now having those two, you know, being built. So as much as we commend the government of Plateau State, you know, the news reports show that Plateau State has about 750,000 out-of-school children, which, of course, is a staggering figure that, of course, must be addressed as quickly as possible. There's too much work that needs to be done to reduce the number of out-of-school children in the state. I've always argued that the number of, that every single local government in Nigeria receives between 100 to 200 million, sometimes 250 million every month. And so there's almost no excuse why some of these very, very basic facilities would not be available.
It's really heartbreaking to see. I mean, these are the pictures that we see when we're being asked about education here. And it's very heartbreaking. We check the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Looking at the state, you know, and how much effort the state is, like you said, I think the word is really actually embarrassing. I don't know that we prioritize education as much as we should. There have been lots of promises, you know, regarding education in Plateau State. Third Fund has said they will do more projects. We're seeing individuals, you know, and but there was one I even saw, I think it was last year, about how core members were the ones who donated classrooms to LEA Primary School. That's the primary school that was attacked in Kuriga.
Yeah.
So they donated 3 classrooms to them. So we want to see more. We want to see more. At this point, to be honest, I know that we can. I don't think we can completely depend on the government to be able to give the help or give the support that these people need. Until then, as much support as we can get for the education sector is totally and should be completely welcome.
Yeah, but you know, also to mention, you know, that as much as, yeah, I mean, I think I started with commending the government, but I think it's also important to mention that I feel like in 2024, there's certain things that you don't need to be taking pictures, you know, about. There's certain things, yeah, there are certain things that you don't need to be doing, you know, cutting ribbons for. It's a school building that you have no reason, you know, for it not exist in the first place. And so, I mean, you really should not be celebrating this or calling press to take pictures, you know, over a school building that, you know, you finally put there that should have been there decades and decades and decades ago. Of course, if you look at the building, it's not even any, you know,
it's nothing to write home about. Anyway,
but
let's move away from there. We're seeing that there's much that needs to be done, but let's head over to other conversations. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo, at a public lecture on Saturday, declared that Nigeria is becoming increasingly volatile and filled with suffering. He highlighted various critical issues, particularly focusing on the nation's growing insecurity, which has rendered the country dangerous and exacerbated widespread hunger.
Former President Olusegun Obasanjo criticized the removal of history from Nigeria's educational curriculum amongst a, you know, myriad of issues. He stressed the urgent need for leadership to step up and create a better environment for Nigerians, emphasizing that despite Africa's rich resources, poor leadership has stymied progress and development. To discuss some of these issues, we're joined by Achike Chude, his public affairs analyst. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the program. Of course, you know, every now and then the former president speaks up, you know, and of course, you know, shares his thoughts on the current situation across the country. Those, of course, some people would also criticize him for the role that he played. But let's get into some of the things that he mentioned. You know, let's start with insecurity. We have a new government in office that, of course, you know, has a lot of responsibility on its hands. Would you say that they seem to have, you know, started on the right footing? And of course, they're tackling some of these issues head on as they promised?
what I do know is that every government comes in with the initial swagger, as we call it in Nigeria. You know, every government, there's no government, you know, that has not come in with a lot of hope in terms of, you know, what they tell the people, you know, and that is especially in a democratic system where governments are brought into power by characterize every government. You know, it's like a new wind that is being blown, you know, across the landscape. It is the best moment for the government because a government, any government is strongest, you know, at the point of its newness, before people begin to, so people become wary of continuous statements from the government, which they attribute over time, if they don't see concrete results, as propaganda. This finest moment in terms of, you know, the feeling of the people. But as the months go by and as the years go by, and people do not see any visible, any means, any indicator, they will grow in criticism, and then that government will find it very difficult to also, without getting the will of the people, to move on along. So I think, in a way, what the government, it is going to stand subsequently, and that is the foundation of policies, coming up with policies and so on. And they have done is that people don't eat policies, you know. People don't live on policies, really. So what people are looking at is their immediate circumstance, their existence at this particular moment, which the government has not bettered. In fact, as a result of these policies, the people have had to endure a series of suffering, unmitigated, unprecedented suffering, you know, never seen before. And so, obviously, they're going to hold the government responsible because the government came in to do something with the economy, to do something about insecurity in the country, to do something about fighting corruption and so on. All of those things that the APC talked about, even in 2011, prior to removing the PDP government of Goodluck Jonathan.
All right. The suffering and hunger, unfortunately, is something that most Nigerians experience, but the major question is whether the government is aware, or do you find that the government is completely disconnected from the reality of the suffering and the hunger that the average Nigerian is going through?
Well, the government, through their spokespeople, even the president too, have given an indication that they are very much aware of what Nigerians are going through, that and they predicate what will happen on the fact that Nigerians should endure the pain. These pains are normally associated with growth and progress. You know, so that's, from that perspective, the government would claim that they know, you know. But don't forget that even if they say they know, they are not wearing the shoes. And just like Bob Marley said, it's he who wears the shoes knows where it pinches, knows how it pinches. You know, so obviously they are not wearing the shoes that we're wearing. So regardless of the acknowledgement of the suffering in the land, they don't know how deep and burdensome this suffering is. But again, in a way, you know, by their actions, because action, you know, by their actions, they seem not to know that people, Nigerians, are suffering. These are the people that bought SUVs for over, have so much budget for constituency assembly members, and of course, as it is in the National Assembly, we don't know all of the secrets that are going on too.
We're struggling with the audio, Mr. Machikechude. We're hoping that we can sort it out and reconnect and continue this conversation. But for now, we'll move on from this conversation to talk about the strike by organized labor, which is scheduled to kick off today, and to see exactly what the demands are from the labor and if these demands can be met. We'll go on a very quick break, and when we come back, the conversation continues.
Now, fuel distribution, health, banking, and other essential services nationwide will be shut down from today as the Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, and of course the Trade Union Congress, TUC, begins its indefinite strike over minimum wage and the recent hike in the electricity tariff. This follows yesterday's failed intervention by the National Assembly to convince organized labor otherwise.
NLC and TUC leaders had on Workers' Day celebration, giving the federal government May 31st as its deadline to conclude negotiations on a new national minimum wage or risk nationwide industrial unrest. The tripartite committee came to the negotiation table for the third time on Friday, the 31st of May, but again, Labour walked away as the government did not make a new offer beyond 60,000 naira against Labour's 494,000 naira.
We would have been much more happier if this evening that the issues of we have a great understanding that by tomorrow morning we will sign off issues bordering on the minimum wage. Because before we, as at the last meeting, we were very, very close to signing off. I mean, close in the sense that if the figures were right, it's just to prepare a report and sign. So it's not something that is that lengthy anymore. But we have listened to them. We would take all their plea to our organs, and we would have an organs meeting taking what they have promised and the pleas that they have made to our organs. For now, we don't have the powers to call off the industrial action, so the industrial action will continue while we would have a conversation with our respective organs as soon as possible to lay bare what they have put forward and what they have proposed.
Meanwhile, the federal government, in a swift reaction yesterday, warned both unions to shelve the proposed indefinite strike, saying it was premature and illegal. Joining us to discuss this is Ireoluwa Oguntuashe, law expert, labor law expert. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I would like to find out what your thoughts are on the negotiation process and organized labor's demands. Do you think, like some think, is unrealistic and that the government cannot pay it? Or do you think that the government has the necessary capacity to pay for this, but it's probably just been difficult?
Okay, thanks for having me. When you talk about something, whether it is realistic or unrealistic, there are a range of factors that we're going to look at. And let's consider the last time, 2019, that we had the last minimum wage. Look at the rate of inflation, look at the rate, the amount in which you assess health, in hospital. Look at the price in which you buy food, and now compare it to this period 5 years after. You realize that, the situation is not the same. It has really skyrocketed. Probably that's the reason Labour is projecting that amount. But I should also say that Labour needs to watch it. They need to be very careful, because projecting an amount of 494,000, that is the last proposal that they've come to. 494,000, in my opinion, appears too high. And why am I saying this? Now, we know that, like you rightly said, a tripartite committee was constituted, and this tripartite committee does not involve the federal government alone. I think Labour should not look at this thing from the angle or from the prism of federal government paying minimum wage. Organized private sector would also pay minimum wage, because the Minimum Wage Act would apply, across board to the federal government employees, state government employees, and organized labor sector. So this being so, I think the question we need to be asking ourselves is that how much can the organized private sector go, in consenting to this proposal of Labour? How much can the respective state government also go in consenting to the proposal of Labour? Because when the minimum wage was even 30,000, we cannot be referring to the Minimum Wage Act of 2019 as the extant minimum wage again. It should have been amended. So when the minimum wage was 30,000, there are some state government that are even struggling with it. I wouldn't want to delve into the reason it may have been difficult or practically challenging for them to pay as low as 30,000. But the existential reality is that they're still struggling to pay the minimum wage of 30,000. So given this fact, if Labour is now proposing a minimum wage of 494,000, is on that premise I'm looking at the realistic nature. It is okay for people to canvass argument of leakages. It is okay for people to canvass argument of corruption. It is okay for people to canvass argument of financial misappropriety. But one thing that is very important is also that the law forbids the doing of something that is impossible. And that's why the litmus question comes. Is it possible for the organized private sector and for the state government to pay 494,000? That is why we should be looking at this thing. Yeah. Because even if federal government agrees with labor, I believe the organized private sector will suffer. And I believe that this thing will generate more litigation in courts. While I favor the fact that minimum wage should be increased and should be more than the 60,000, I also think that labor also needs to come down, such that it will be seen that the amount they will agree on may not necessarily be living wage, but may be close to the amount of the living wage.
All right. I mean, so also quickly speak on the legality of the strike, because the government says it's illegal and, premature. So speak about, the legality of going on a strike now by Labour and TUC. And then also, they had deliberations yesterday evening that amounted to, well, nothing. What do you think are some of the things that should be spoken about when they have these deliberations between the National Assembly, or rather between the Nigerian government and Labour? What are some of the, details that must be brought out, and of course be deliberated upon? What can the government also, say to Labour that may, make them call off the strike?
Okay, the question you've asked is like three questions in one, so I'll pick it one after the other. Now, you ask about the legality of the strike based on what the Attorney General of the Federation had said. Now, I think there are 2 or 3 grounds. The number one, that the basis upon which the AG Fed has said that the strike is illegal is number one, on the premise of Section 41 and Section 42 of the Trade Dispute Act. Now, Section 41 of the Trade Dispute Act talks about preventing a worker from going on strike if the worker is within essential service. Now, if I talk about this, the question I'm going to ask is that all the employees in the organized labor sector that are on strike, are they conceptualized under the Trade Dispute Act to be performing essential services? Because the first schedule of the Trade Dispute Act also tried to bring out, the categories of workers that are under essential services: CBN employees, employees of Nigerian Security Printing and Minting Company Limited, employees of the bank, doctors and nurses, employees that are involved in electricity supply, and 2 or 3 other categories of employees. In my mind, I think that the totality of employees that have gone on strike now, in accordance with what, in accordance or to support the Nigerian Labour Congress, they are not totally classified as employees that are in the essential labor sector or that are performing essential services. So on that premise, I would think that the opinion or the correspondence brought out, by the AGF on the premise of Section 41, to me, does not mean that they cannot go on strike, does not mean that the strike is illegal. Now, come to think of it, strike in its sense, like I've said before, is a constitutional right, that is guaranteed pursuant to Chapter 4, Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution. And the Trade Dispute Act also provides for a provision for strikes. So I don't think that the strike is illegal, in my own opinion. And come to think of it also, before the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, decides to go on strike, and TUC, they had already given out a notice, sufficient notice, to the Nigerian government that if we don't settle this thing by the 31st of May, we may need to commence industrial action. So I think that notice is sufficient enough, because the Section 41 and Section 42 talks about notice, 15 days notice. Now, can we say that that notice has not been given? In my opinion, it is subjective. The notice has been given. And again, I don't think that the Attorney General of the Federation is the court, is the adjudicatory body that can rightly say, with all due respect, that the strike, the present strike now is illegal. And why am I saying this? Now, Section 6 of the 1999 Constitution, as amended, vested adjudicatory powers on the judiciary. Section 287 of the 1999 Constitution, as amended, now says that any order that is given by the court must be obeyed. So the question again is whether an order has been given by the courts pursuant to Section 287 of the 1999 Constitution stating that the strike is illegal. As at this present moment, I don't think there is no order. So it's on that premise that I think that the strike is illegal. Now, on what the federal government can do, in the process of negotiating with labor is very simple. I think the issue, the existential reality has always been that there is no mutual trust between labor and the federal government. And also, by extension, I'm seeing less trust now between the Nigerian employees and labor. And this is because, every time labor comes out to say that they are going on strike, people usually feel that at one point or the other, they may have compromised their position. I think labor needs to work on that. Let people invest so much trust in them.
Okay, so now looking at this particular situation, do you foresee,
yes.
How do you think this strike is going to turn out? Do you think it's one of the ones that Nigerian employees would see as one that might be compromised before it even gets started? That's one. And what would you say the impact of this strike is on Nigeria's economy?
Whether I like it or not, there is more pressure on the Nigerian Labour Congress to call off the strike. I'm not even talking of NLC compromising their position now, but due to the pressure, because they would also be looking at things from every perspective. And the implication is not far-fetched. It's very simple. It's going to have far-reaching implication on our economy. People will not go to work. Nigeria will lose money. We're still trying to build up our revenue base, and Nigeria will lose money. And also, the people that are supposed to be productive will not be productive. Artisans on the streets will feel it. People on the street will feel it. The streets will be dry. And we should also consider the fact that, our economy is gradually tilting towards the doldrum. So for me, I've never been an advocate of strike because of the economic implication, although the provision for strike is constitutional. But I've always been an advocate of picketing, which unfortunately the Nigerian Labour Congress is not doing in this circumstance.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you mentioned, there's a trust deficit between NLC and the government, same with the trust deficit between the Nigerian people and the Nigerian workers and the NLC. But, I still want you to speak a little bit more on what the federal government, can say to convince labor to call off their strike. Are they going to, say 65,000 now, or maybe 70,000? I mean, should they continue to add more to the 60,000 to maybe convince labor? Or is there other things that might be, well enough? Are there incentives that they maybe would offer? You remember when the fuel subsidy statement was made by the president, he then offered some, what they call them now? Buses, the CNG buses, transportation, offered, some cash supply across the country to ease. So are those some of the things that the government maybe should offer to labor, to make them call off the strike?
Yes, I agree with you. Those are some of the things the federal government can offer to labor. But in addition to that, I would also suggest that in addition to the increase in the minimum wage that should happen, federal government should not remove the 35,000 wage demands. That would also serve as a cushion on the side. Don't forget that the policy came up in September, and I think it was a 6-month policy. And as at present, I think the policy has ended. So I think that policy should be reintroduced. The 35,000 wage demand, wage policy should be introduced. That's on one hand. On the other hand, federal government should also be sincere enough with Nigerians to come up with practical solutions of increasing this minimum wage. And when I say practical solutions, what do I mean? 60,000 is not practical. A bag of rice is 80,000 naira. For a family of 4, for a family of 5, 60,000 is definitely not practical. That is number 2. So they need to, the argument of saying that they increase it by 100% by adding 30,000 to it in addition to the previous 30,000, to me, is not logical. If I'm looking at a practical solution, why can't they propose a sum of, let's say, 120,000? If they propose a sum of 120,000, in as much as I believe that amount may still not be enough, but at least it's something that practical negotiation can be premised on. And it will be a substantial shift, from their 60,000 to this current anticipated proposal or proposed proposal of 120,000.
Mr. Oguntuashe, I'm not sure if you can still hear us. All right, but while we try to reconnect with you, the conversation, of course, is just exposing or, opening up the little details concerning the NLC and the federal government's back and forth on this latest NLC strike. And I was going to ask him if, a reversal of the power tariff removal, if that maybe would be convincing enough for, the strike to be called off. If the federal government says, okay, we're going to take out this 225 naira for a band A new, laws, and we're going to get everybody back to 65 naira or 60 naira per kilowatt hour, would that maybe be convincing enough? What can the federal government really offer? What can the federal government really afford even? Is Nigeria currently generating enough money for it to be, to pay 100,000, 120,000 naira minimum wage? What difference would that make to our annual spendings, capital expenditure and recurrent expenditure, I beg your pardon? These are some of the things that I believe, we maybe need to get more clarity on. What is our current recurrent expenditure? How much difference will it make? Or will it, how much difference, would need to be added to it to enable the federal government pay 100,000, 120,000 a minimum wage? Do we need to borrow more money to pay 120,000 a minimum wage? If we don't have clarity on these things, then these deliberations would almost lead nowhere.
Right, let's move away from there. There's a lot of drama happening. It's not just with the labor, but even the discos and the GENCOs, it would seem. Power generation companies, GENCOs, have lamented a debt of 2 trillion naira owed them by the federal government for power they generated, stating that 90% of their monthly invoices remain unpaid. According to a statement signed by GENCO's board chairman, Colonel Sani Bello, the issue is currently endangering the continued operation of their power generation plants.
The Union of Power Generation Companies have requested for immediate and expedited action to be taken to prevent national security challenges that may result from the failure of the GENCOs to sustain steady generation of electricity for Nigerians. Now, besides being owed huge debts, GENCOs also lament operating under very harsh monetary and fiscal conditions occasioned by the economic realities that face the country today. These, of course, if you remember, just yesterday there was an announcement of a power shortage that will take place from midnight yesterday, Sunday. Of course, moving forward, as the GENCOs, likely also doing their own little protest against the federal government and, of course, the money that they're being owed.
So whilst we're experiencing the shutdown of the economy from organized labor, I'm not saying that we do not understand, we completely understand why there are reasons for the shutdown. While we're experiencing that, we're having the GENCOs and theirs as well. It just feels like everything keeps happening to us at the same time. And it's almost like we can't get a break.
Yeah, but these aren't problems. They are not artificial problems. These are issues that GENCOs have had for a very long time, since the inception of these generation companies. In fact, from the moment that these companies were started across the country, they have always had these complaints that they continue to invest and invest and invest, and they're not making enough money back to, buy power and distribute. It's not new. We've also spoken about the discos, and how discos have also been, continue to owe money to the GENCOs because discos have their own problems. They say, of course, if you look at the EEDCO, EKEDC, BEDC, AEDC, all of them across the country, they have the same complaints that as much power as they distribute, they're not making enough money because there's a huge debt in power infrastructure that makes it almost impossible for them to generate money back for the power that they distribute. And that's why they almost, I remember a couple of years ago, there was the very popular conversation about how distribution companies are not even buying enough power from the GENCOs. Like when they tell them that they have, for example, 1,000 megawatts that they want to give to the southwestern part or the south or the southeast, those distribution companies will take only 500, and leave 500. I'm just giving for example, because they know that this is what they'll be able to distribute and get their money back because people were in pain. But it's not just citizens, even the federal government and its, its offices across the country, including Aso Rock, is owing for power. So these aren't just problems that started last week. They've always had a problem with generating money. And of course, these debts will continue to pile up and pile up and pile up for many, many, many years. So, if this is where we've gotten to now, that they are now talking about 2 trillion naira debt, it is a problem that has been going on for a long time. What must be done? In what ways do we, solve this problem? They have to, of course, come, together. the transmission companies, the distribution companies, generation companies, everybody needs to have a sit-down with the federal government and say, these are where we need assistance. Do we need to continue to increase the electricity tariff? Would that help us generate more money? Would Nigerian citizens even be willing to pay more? If you increase from 225 now to 400 naira per kilowatt hour, Nigerian citizens, of course, will bear the brunt of that. But will that answer the problems? Not very likely. There's a serious debt in infrastructure with regards to power, in Nigeria that must be fixed amongst, other policies, before we maybe get to solve this problem. So, more strikes, apparently, and of course, more.
This just sounds like a message of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But it's a reality.
Now it's time to take a look at the newspapers this morning and, of course, find out what major stories are making headlines across Nigeria. Joining us, we have Dotun Ojon, who's a public affairs analyst, to share his thoughts on these stories. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's kick off on the Vanguard newspapers, I believe, and see what we can find over there. Very big stories there. Minimum wage, fuel, schools, banks, and others to be shut as strike begins today. TUC directs Pengerson, senior civil servants to comply. Labor charges workers to beware of government antics. Your proposed strike is illegal. Federal government warns NLC and TUC. Suspend nationwide strike. Senate reps beg NLC and TUC. All right. Also on the Vanguard this morning, anxiety. This is very interesting also. As federal government borrows 20.1 trillion naira on that Tinubu. I don't think any story should be bigger than that. Gencos cry out over 3.7 trillion naira debt. In fact, the Vanguard this morning is really, really interesting. Top of the screen there, you see the problem with Tinubu's misfiring leadership. And also, Nigeria must leverage national assets to attract forex inflow. Those are the stories on the Vanguard newspapers this morning.
All right, so let's head this morning to our next newspaper. On the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning, the big story on the Punch newspaper says, minimum wage. AGF tackles labor as NAS fails to stop strike. AGF says, planned strike violates court order. Federal government insists on 60,000 naira. And still on the front page, CBN clears $830 million foreign airlines trapped funds, according to Ayata. Ex-worker accomplice kill Lagos businessman and steal 3.2 million naira. Wow. 24,535 candidates to retake UTME June 22. That's, of course, by JAMB. Why do we have 24,000 candidates? Is it that they failed? At the top of the paper, Gencos threaten shutdown as debts hit 3.7 trillion naira. Naira devaluation pushes listed firms' forex debts near 4 trillion naira. That's all that we have on the front page. Can we take one more paper, or we should just go into...
I think we'll start with these two first.
Okay. Okay, let's quickly run through the Tribune. On the front page of the Tribune, I didn't believe I would last 1 month in office, says Fubara. Well, look at you now. Mining, federal government to expend martial corps, 200 per state. Minimum wage, National Assembly leaders step in as AGF declares labor strike illegal. We won't accept starvation wage, says NLC president. He tells Akpabio and Abbas. As labor insists on total shutdown of schools, banks, government offices, electricity. Mistakes of several decades can't be repaired in one day, Rep Speaker says. WAEC Rice School principals says exams will continue as scheduled. Aida Tiwa rolls out electricity meters and their prices. Nigeria to no longer indebted to foreign carriers, according to Ayata. Windstorm kills 5, injures 3 in Bauchi. Labour Party crisis festers as Obi's supporters reject Abure's new directorate. Food inflation, customers, traders lament as FCCPC visits Lagos markets. And that's the story with JAMB as well, with 24,535 supplementary candidates to write supplementary exams. Mr. Ojon, let's begin with the labor story. The AGF is saying that the strike is legal. Strike has commenced. He said to touch every sector. Of course, labor doesn't want to come down to 60,000. Doesn't want to come down to 60,000. Our federal government doesn't want to get up to over 400,000.
Yeah.
So, talk to us about the legality of the strike and really, what is the way forward with this labor NUC NLC brouhaha?
Unfortunately, the way forward is that another government will come and labor will go on strike again. From the first time, one attribute of labor is to continue to demand for more salaries. And
when you
wages.
say another government will come, are you talking after this administration?
Yeah, so another government will come. It means that strike will continue. There's no philosophical backing to anything that says that strike will not continue. Because from the first time that we had the situation of labor going on strike, even in the world, I think it's as far back as the 12th century in Egypt, you see that one way that labor used to get whatever it is that it wants from government is through strike. And government has continued to prove to labor that they may not do their bidding until they go on strike. So it is what it is. Unfortunately, what will continue to fuel labor strike is the fact that people in authority have continued to live in opulence, and they continue to tell the masses to tighten their belt. So if you represent the people, averagely we are talking about the poorest of the poor and the middle class. So if you represent them and you continue to compare the reality of the lives of people living, working in government with the people working for government, then you discover that there's always a huge gap. That's why it is understandable sometimes when labor comes out to say, oh, we want to go on strike. And it's also understandable for government across board to continue to think that, oh, if we pay labor so amount of money, we may not have anything left. So it may continue to continue.
Okay, we'll get more into more details, but let's quickly find out exactly how the strike is playing out. The strike is being upheld, and what exactly is happening. We have our correspondent who's on standby to bring us updates. Good morning, Joshua.
Good morning, Olive.
All right, Joshua, where are you, and what is the situation regarding the strike? Would you say that people are adhering to the strike?
I'm standing currently at the Federal Secretariat in Abuja, and as you can see behind me, the gates are shut and under lock and key. There is a growing amount of people picketing around the Federal Secretariat, and due to all indications, it is shown that the strike is fully in action. Even right from my bus stop down to this place, there was a huge turnout of commuters from their houses down to the Secretariat. And one thing that we know for sure is that there is a very, very high compliance of the strike here in Federal Secretariat, Abuja.
All right, but have you gotten to interact with anyone, to get their thoughts on, their support for the NLC and its strike action?
Not yet. We've not actually gotten the opportunity to interact with them. But the only opportunity we had was with a witness who tried gaining access into one of the buildings. And the person said they were being turned back by the security personnel on duty, that the strike is on, and they were receiving orders from people we could not rectify or get through at this moment.
All right. We're hoping that we can reconnect with you at 9 a.m. to get more details. Hopefully we can see more people and then weigh their opinion. And who knows, maybe see representatives from the Secretariat and from NLC as well. Thank you very much for bringing us that update. So now, back to you. How do you see this eventually turning out? Is there going to be an increase on the government's part? They obviously have to come back to the negotiation table.
Yes. Before now, you agree with me, I think since May, Labour has been going back and forth as to, we'll go on strike if this is not sorted. And government has also been tactically dragging its feet. It's also part of negotiation across the world, because you have to continue to delay in the hope that there will be an agreement at the end of the day. And it's not even a subject of who is in power. It's just a subject of a continuous mentality of government that we cannot pay more than a certain amount of money. It is everywhere. Now, when you now have a situation like ours, then you need to be more tactical. What's the situation we are in now? The economy as we speak now is not friendly. You can see now that the federal secretariat has been locked. Today, federal government will lose and state government will lose about 50 billion naira each day that the strike continues. I'm just being fair because I'm using the calculation of what the MBS said in 2023. So if we can't have this fragile economy, there's possibility today now that naira will crash again, because the liquidity of dollar would be affected because of the strike. There's also possibility that electricity supplied to some private organizations who may not necessarily even want to join the strike may also be challenged. There will be issues at filling stations. So it's a holistic problem that we have in our hand. We cannot continue to play with strike at this point in time that everyone is still on the prayer mat praying that we have a better economy.
But here's the thing that, yes, like you said, there will be repeated strikes, until we, find some balance. But where exactly are we finding the balance? Because the federal government, would claim that it cannot afford to pay 400,000. It might also argue that they cannot afford to pay 200,000. Nigerians would then say, okay, can you pay 100, maybe 150? But will the argument be sellable that the federal government can't afford, even 100,000, 150,000?
Fantastic.
And if it has to afford it, where's the money going to come from?
Now, there's no doubt in the fact that the federal government can actually afford it. There's no doubt, because what we've done with subsidy is the fact that we've been able to get more money. Unfortunately, this more money, labor, or even the people of Nigeria do not believe that this more money we have gotten will be used for their welfare. And that's why I said that strike may continue. So what is going to bring an end to strike? What's going to be the balance? The balance is not when you give labor 400,000. If you give anybody in the civil service now 400,000 naira, he will look at it, and maybe he has worked for 25 years. He will now look at the life of a young politician who just became a honorable some few months ago, building houses, buying cars. So the cure from all of this is not even more money. It's for the Nigerian people to be able to believe that their leaders are actually working for them. And how do you want to believe that? It's by saying, oh, we have 2 billion, and we are using this 2 billion to build road for the people's use. So the point of agreement is not more money, and I've continued to say this. The point of agreement is believability in your government, that your government is actually working for you. That's the distant gap that we're having presently in Nigeria. And I keep saying it, the government needs to do more. Now, you have increased the allocation that you're giving to state governors by unreasonable percentage, because the money is now there. What do you want Labour to do? And they know that these monies that are being paid governors are not being used for the development of the people. So this is where the disconnect is.
Yeah, so we can also touch on other stories, and I think it's also fair to mention that, there's people who would argue that we're not necessarily saving money from the petrol subsidy removal, because first of all, there's the argument that we're even paying more for subsidy now, because, if you look at the dollar price,
it is obvious.
It's obvious that we're paying more. So we're not actually saving money. And then also, it's not like we always had a wardrobe full of cash that we're using to pay subsidy. It is just that now that there's no subsidy, if there wasn't subsidy, we don't have to borrow anymore. So there's some confusion there. But let's talk about another problem that I think seems to have flown under the radar, which is anxiety as federal government borrows 20.1 trillion naira under Tinubu. This is in 1 year. The Nigerian government didn't give a clear indication of what it achieved in the last 1 year, but it seems that we've borrowed 20 trillion naira. Mr. John, are we in more trouble?
Now, this explains why Labour will continue to demand for what is high. This explains why Labour may not believe in the government. We may be in a very serious crisis. And I just want to be a bit modest this morning. And this is what I mean. If you knew from the beginning that there are two things that completely put us into this trouble. The first one is when you remove fuel subsidy. You were thinking that you were going to have more money to solve your problem. Unfortunately for you, you didn't think it through before you liberalize the foreign exchange market. Now, when you liberalize the foreign exchange market, now every gain that you were supposed to make from the removal of subsidy has been drained into payment of subsidy, because you need to maintain a certain amount of money for your people to be able to get access to fuel. So you do not have anything. Now you have put people in hardship, then you have gone back to borrow again. We were running from borrowing, if you remember. Mm-hmm. At the point, the government said they were using up to 70% of whatever it is that we earn to service debt. Yes. Yeah. Now that's exactly what we were running from. That was what led us into removing subsidy. Unfortunately, because maybe people didn't think through, you now did that two critical things at the same time. So we may continue to borrow, because when the naira actually came down, the ability of the naira not to have stayed below 1,000 suggested to me that we have not actually gotten our strategy right. It has found its equilibrium now as we speak now. That's why you see that it's hovering around 1,500. What message does that send to you? It's actually sending a message that, oh, in reality, that is where the power of the naira is. But people in government are actually calculating the value of the naira with 600 and something naira. I think 680 naira. So anything you see between 680 naira and 1,500 is the subsidy we are paying on oil. And I think that's huge. So we may continue to borrow money. And that's where the idea of, okay, now let's stop borrowing foreign money. Let's look inwards. And that's where the idea of, oh, let's, this pension fund and all of that. And I'm seeing the government also going to religious houses because they also make a lot of money to say, oh, okay, also borrow us. We are going to pay interest because in my head, I'm looking at areas that the government can also delve into. I'm seeing the government going to NURTW, for example, maybe in Lagos, to go and ask for money. These are groups and agencies that are making a whole lot of money.
You know, and you know, also continuing to, you know, raise taxes here and there. You know, of course, not widening the tax bracket, and of course, not creating opportunities for people to be engaged enough to even pay taxes, but just, you know, continuing to take and take and take and take. And it doesn't sound like a government that really is thinking. You know,
the reality of what President Tinubu met actually scared him. He never knew. No, I'm being honest with you.
There could be that. There could be that.
The complexity of what we have in Nigeria today, I think, is he cannot accurately calculate that if I did this, this is going to be the result.
Would you say that this would have also been the outcome if any other person had come into office?
Now, if I'm to, because this is what I did, I looked at all their manifestos and I saw the reality of what, because your manifesto is the design of your thinking pattern. So when I look at the manifesto, I felt that all of them will have, except SDP and Showore and one other presidential candidate, all of them said they were going to remove subsidy. They did not talk about the liberalization of the foreign exchange. If the problem we had was, oh, we just remove subsidy and we continue to support our naira, we'll have had more money to do that. But when you take those two critical steps at the same time, it will plunge you into crisis. And I think that's the point we're in.
This is, you know, where, you know, I personally would struggle with the idea of, oh, what the government meant there, you know, was too shocking. They knew. They had an idea. They campaigned for months. They campaigned for years even to get into that position. So you can't get in there and then be surprised.
Now,
and because former President Muhammad Buhari said the same thing, that they got in there and the mess that they met in there was too much for them to handle. And that excuse is played out. It's boring. Nobody wants to hear that anymore in Nigeria. That's one thing. Another thing is, if you fought so hard to get into that position, you, as an analyst, you're not the only one across Nigeria who knows a different way of doing things. There's no way that the Nigerian government, Wale Edun, Yemi Cardoso, the president and his economic management team, can say that they haven't heard any of these other ideas that they could have tried out.
Let me tell you
so when they take the steps that they've taken, they should take their responsibility that they failed. Because there's many other brilliant economists in the country that will say, don't do this.
I think you are not reasoning like a politician. Let me bring the political side of me out this morning. You see, political promise always creates an impression of a quick fix. But political performance always travels at the speed of a sick snail. So when somebody comes across to you and makes political promise that, oh, I am going to fix this, you must ask the person how. The disconnect between the thinking pattern of the electorate of Nigeria and the reality of what our governors do is the fact that we do not have the opportunity to ask how. So they have come, that's why when I scrutinize your promises, what comes to my mind is that what architectural structure have you put in place to achieve this? I will say it again. I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I don't know whether it's in support or against him, but I think the president is overwhelmed. And he has told us repeatedly as Nigerians that we should not pity him. That's going to fix it. That's why I saw the coordinating...
Will he resign?
that's going to fix the mess.
That's what I'm saying. But if he does, 3 years and realizes that, okay,
that he cannot do it.
Trying, I'm not.
Now, he has, if he did that for 3 years and is unable to fix it, he has returned power to the people. One attribute of the character of leadership is your ability to return power to the people. And we have it in essence in democracy. That's why most times when I judge Nigerians, what they clamor for is different from what they really want. After 4 years, they return power to you to say, we are contesting again. And you have the power to say, I want to vote for you or not. It's a high, and I take responsibility for this morning. It is high sense of insanity to have voted for President Buhari for a second time after the obvious failure of his first 4 times. But Nigeria went and voted for
but
him.
when you say obvious failure, it's not because he owned up that he failed.
No, it's because we knew that he failed.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Well, people still queue behind him.
But don't you see that even happening? Now, let's not presume or preempt President Tinubu's tenure. But even if in the event, I mean, we hope that that's not our reality because we want the best for Nigeria. We want his policies to work for Nigeria and in Nigeria's favor. But in the event that things don't work out, because for now it's still looking bleak, if in the next 3 years things don't pick up, do you think he'll be willing to not run for a second term?
Okay, the minister came out to say yesterday, and I'm going to pick it from there, that, there are indications that things are looking up. I want to believe that. But peradventure, it didn't work out the way the minister has painted it yesterday. It does not mean that President Tinubu will not run for a second time. Now, anytime he comes out to say that I'm running for a second time, he's returning power to the electorate. That you, the electorate, decide. We cannot hold somebody's destiny and prevent them from expressing it. But the electorate has to decide. That's what I'm saying. But the Nigerian people will go back again and vote for him.
No, so is it really about them going back to vote for him? Do you think that Nigerians are at a point, like Nigeria is at a point where we 100% believe in our electoral system?
The truth is that at every point in time, and I said this, at every point in time, the kind of leadership you have in every organization is a reflection of the complexity of the character of the majority of your people. Now, we may say, it's not doing it very well. It's not doing it very well. And the question I keep asking people is that when you have the opportunity, would you have done differently? Because at every point in time, it comes with this traffic, this even traffic, the way we behave in traffic is a reflection of who you are. One day, this funny example, I was sleeping in the vehicle. It's a crested vehicle. So I slept off, and before I knew it, my driver had gone into the BRT lane. I woke up and I found myself in the BRT lane. I said, guy, where did you enter? I was joking. Where did you enter? I said, sir, he described the place. I said, turn back. We now turn back, came out from where he entered. It's about many kilometers. We do all of this because we need to create an impression that if we have the opportunity, we're going to do it differently. But I see people come to us daily. It's not as if they have interest of the nation at heart. So as we have now, we are still reflecting, the leadership is still reflecting our character and attitude. And this will be stamped by, if, God forbid, if President Tinubu did not perform excellently well and people go back to vote for him again.
I just want to remind our viewers this morning, you could be a part of the conversation. The phone lines are active. Share with us, your thoughts on some of the things that we've spoken about so far. It's been a very interesting Monday morning, and I'm sure this reflects the mood across the nation. Quickly, there's a story on the Vanguard also. Genco's crying over 3.7 trillion naira debt. They, of course, is also a notice of a shutdown of electricity supply from last night. I'm not sure if that's why I didn't wake up with power this morning or there's a different reason. So quickly share your thoughts. They've had this struggle for a long time. They've always continued to cry out about issues with regards, recouping funds back from, the Nigerian people.
This is one of the reasons why people don't even believe in government. Sometimes you don't even know how to help the situation. You remember in 2002, before the general election of 2023, the Obasanjo administration, through former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, had painted a glorious picture of what privatization would do for us as a nation.
Yes.
And everybody thought that once we are able, in fact, they ridiculously sold some of our assets painfully, that we didn't know that they were selling our future, because the result that they promised us, we never got. The asset that they sold is gone into the hand of private individual forever. So this has been our practice as a people. And we cannot, as a people, we cannot continue to watch people sell our future like this. Now, in a country of 200 million, you remember I keep saying it here, municipals, what do they call them, local councils in South Africa, are generating electricity. But here, we have gone to a point for so long a time, until recently, even if you generate, you have to push it back to the national grid. Equalizing failure. It means that if your governor is a good man who has the first side that he has to provide electricity, he's going to still push it back. This discourage, and you know that electricity, investment in electricity is not something that you will reap immediately. And those who occupy political offices, they do so because they want to be praised, not because they want to do anything that will last the test of time. So now, if 200 million people, we cannot generate 20,000 megawatts of electricity, there's an issue. And this is why our economy keeps failing. I tell people that the problem we have is not whether we are importing too much or not. The challenge is that we must give people the opportunity, the leverage, the power to be able to produce according to the mental capacity that they have.
Okay, let's take this call first. We have Wande calling from Lagos. Good morning, Wande. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It looks like I really love how fired up your guest is this morning. The energy is fantastic. Okay, but I just have a simple question based on something he said. We'll call it a rhetorical question. He mentioned it said something about it is insanity for Nigerians to have voted Buhari a second time. Well, my funny question is, did we really vote him in, or he voted himself in? I don't know. We never know these things, you know. It's one thing for Nigerians to actually go out to vote. It's another thing for the numbers not to match up. You understand what I'm saying? Anyway, have a good show, guys.
When the community decides that they want a change, no number can be manipulated. In fact, the good thing about politics is
would you say the same thing in River State? Do you think that the people of River State love the APC so much?
In politics, the process of getting your leader does not stop at casting ballots. In fact, it is the first process. If the community agrees that this is what we want, everybody must align. Even if, I tell people, I ask them a very simple question. And I don't want to mention the name of the most corrupt agency in Nigeria. I will share that. These are people I've worked with. If you know them, if you have worked with them, when you see police on the road, you have to salute them that you are actually, your agency is a good agency. Now, when people say they are running for office, they post poster and all of that, who go there to manipulate vote for them? It is still Nigerian people, not even necessarily politicians. It's because we have not, this fire that is burning has not burnt us to a point where we realize that everything we need is in the hand of government. And until we vote for the right people, we are not going to get the result we get. That's why sometimes, as bad as the economy is, you just think sometimes that maybe this is what we need to actually reset our brain, to know the importance of government. I was born in the church. When we were growing up, they would preach it on the altar that politics is a dirty game. They discourage people from getting into it. But the fire is burning everybody now. They are now raising Department of Politics in church. So I think this fire will burn us to a point that we'll come to the realization that our destiny, the essence of God, is to do for the people what they cannot do for themselves. And he transferred this essence to government. The essence of government is to help the people do for them what they cannot do for themselves. And until we realize this, we continue to have all manner of people come to rule us and go make promises and not do anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, if Nigeria would ever get there, because they say, if you push Nigerians to the wall, they break the wall and keep going and keep going back. So I don't know if this fire would burn that hot.
It is burning
for the average Nigerian.
It is burning
because you do have a strong point there that when the people really come together, there's no number that can be falsified.
It's just because the ability for people to come together is largely hampered by a number of factors. The fact that people are trying to just make their daily bread, people are trying to eat. That's why it's easier to manipulate their decision and corrupt their decision by just giving them a little to make them be able to afford 3 square meals.
I have tested Nigerians, man. And I come on air to say that one of the reasons why I decided to work in 4 very critical sectors of the economy is to understand how Nigerians think. I have been in the religious circle. I have headed a political party. I have run for election. I've been in the private sector. I started out as a civil servant. And bringing all my experiences together, I have concluded that Nigerians are always in the habit of chickening out. If they don't have money, we blame that it's because we don't have money. Those who have money say, oh, because I can survive, let me just leave them for their own wahala. The unifying factor is this economic power and economic fire that is burning. It will burn us to a point that we will realize that we will not just go out to vote. We will be ready in the face of bullet to defend whatever it is that we have said. If we fail, generations that are coming after us will be in more trouble. That is my own pain. We cannot continue to give excuse of poverty. We draw from the same source of water where we were passing our feces while growing up. People could hide under poverty that they were not going to do anything. So the fire now is burning, the economic power is burning. Nigeria, unfortunately, will lose about 50 billion naira today. I hope that they will go back to negotiation table and do something about it. But if this will continue, it will affect our already fragile economy, and it will not be good for anyone.
Anyway, Dr. John, thank you very much for joining us. Let's take one more call before we wrap up the conversation. Good morning, Wale. Thank you very much for calling. Please go ahead with your comment.
Yeah, good morning. Well done, guys. I'm enjoying the topic, and I so much believe that the commentator in the studio there was, really speaking my mind, because the issue is that it's just issue of integrity and staying put to the ideology that this country is a great nation, and we all have to support each other to make it better. Then if you have the enabling environment for people that want to work to make it better, there are really people that are patriotic and they really want to see the process to the end. And I used to tell people here in my environment that this thing is about us coming out to select and select our leader, and it's not about us saying that it will not work. It will not work. If it will not work, they will not bring the process. And if we do not follow the process too, the process will not work. So that is the reason why. And people just like you said, people just feel like it's up to them. They've already know the people that will win. They already know the people that they select. This thing does not work this way. You guys should come out, just like you said, follow this process, follow your vote, and follow it to the to the logical conclusion. So I really like what he's saying. I really like his patriotic spirit, and I believe that if everybody started putting in mind that this thing will work and just follow the process, and everything will work better. Thank you very much. That's my take.
That wraps up our newspaper analysis this morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Ojan, for joining us.
It's a pleasure, man.
Always a delight to have you.
It's a pleasure.
We, of course, will go on a break now. When we come back, we have Which Way Nigeria. Stay with us.
It is a Monday morning, the 3rd of June, and as of this morning, Nigerians are still very bewildered about how, mostly out of the blues, we certainly have a new national anthem. In the space of just about a week, a bill was passed and assented to by the president to revert to the old national anthem. And many Nigerians are wondering, who asked for this? Of all the things Nigerians are currently begging for, all the demands Nigerians have of the current administration to reduce the cost of living, improve security across the nation so that farmers can freely produce and improve our agricultural sector, for better minimum wage, of course, like the NLC is asking for better roads, for actual ease of doing business, but improved electricity, for Nigerians and IDP camps to be saved and given a life again, for reduction in the number of out-of-school children, for jobs, and many other things. There's nowhere on that list where you would find a call for the reverting to the old national anthem. So again, who asked for it? And what was the thinking behind this move? In what ways does this improve our realities as a country? Who sat down and decided that this was a great move? And will the Nigerian government, of course, and no one's expecting that they would talk to Nigerians, but will anybody? Because I've looked through the Nigerian government social media pages from the president, the Senate president, the National Assembly. None of them has any explanation as to why it was necessary to revert to the old national anthem. There was no consultation. There was no, bringing in the thoughts of the Nigerian people. The senator representing Borno North said that the new national anthem represents the country's people, culture, values, and aspirations. He says the bill is in tandem with the spirit of unity. It will undoubtedly inspire a zeal for patriotism and cooperation. It will promote cultural heritage, and changing the new national anthem will chart a path to greater unity. And this morning I'm asking, how? The national anthem has never been our problem. It has never been the reason Nigerians aren't united. Politics and politicians have divided Nigerians for many, many years, even as they sang the old national anthem. Again, I ask, why is this in any way so important? How relevant is this change in present-day Nigeria? I mean, ask yourself, when is the last time you or any other Nigerian sang the national anthem for any reason? When is the last time any Nigerian, including yourself, sang the national anthem and felt deep love and patriotism for your country? I'm sure you can't remember. We see Americans sing the Star-Spangled Banner, and of course you can tell the difference. There is a deep sense of love and dedication to their country when they sing that anthem. Not because it has the best lyrics, but because of what their nation represents to them. The sense of patriotism a national anthem evokes, it goes beyond just the lyrics. It's more about how your country has also given you life. The average Nigerian does not feel loved by our country. And of course, in the last few years, you've seen Nigerians flood countries like the UK and Canada and America, even the Middle East, instead for a better chance at life. Because they believe that their own country has failed them, failed to protect them, failed to provide the most basic sense of security and humanity for the average Nigerian. In this moment, Nigerians do not need better lyrics for their national anthem. Nigerians need a nation that loves them, a nation that protects them, a nation where they can thrive through honest means. And until Nigerians begin to see some improvement in their lives through the steps that this government is taking, Nigerians will continue to ask the same question: why? Who asked you for a new national anthem? And what does this really do for us? Good morning, Nigerians.
South Africa's governing African National Congress, ANC, lost its 30-year-old outright majority in this week's election, winning only 159 seats in the 400 seats parliament, official results showed on Sunday. President Cyril Ramaphosa and the leaders of most of the rival parties attended the announcement, but former President Jacob Zuma stayed away. No single party won a majority in the National Assembly.
Behind the ANC's 159 seats from 40% of the vote came the center-right Democratic Alliance on 87 seats and 22%. Third place was Zuma's upstart Radical Party, the newly formed, MK Party, which grabbed 14.79% of the votes and, of course, 58 seats. Now, joining us to discuss the results of the South African elections is Trevor Shaku, the national spokesperson of SAFTU. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for having us.
All right. I mean, I'm not sure if, I can describe this election results as shocking, but, did this come as a surprise to you and many other South Africans, seeing the ANC lose this majority? And what does this mean going forward?
Look, this did not come as a surprise. Of course, the fact that it's a 17% decline from 57% in 2019 to 40% now, of course, is somewhat shocking. We had expected that it would decline below 50%, but we never anticipated that it would decline that much. But nonetheless, the political and socio-economic issues that, in our view, would have caused this huge decline from the African National Congress have always been there and have been evident. For instance, we're talking about corrupt governance in terms of the public institutions, in terms of the state-owned enterprises, in which we have seen criminal syndicates, some of whom actually belong to the African National Congress, utilizing state-owned companies to loot and to enrich themselves. We've seen in public institutions, procurement has been made to benefit a number of people who are politically connected. We've seen in public institutions, hiring of people to fill vacant posts actually being done to benefit comrades, to benefit families, girlfriends and boyfriends. All of this, including the fact that there is no reliable running water in our communities, there's no reliable sewage system. In fact, if you go to many of the townships in South Africa, you would find that black townships in particular, you'll find that sewage is running through people's doors and corridors and all of that.
So just to jump in, Trevor, I understand. I mean, so what you're saying is, that the ANC simply has, mostly mismanaged, South Africa as a country, and of course, they've not done well enough, while in office, and that maybe has led to the lack of trust in them by the electorate. But, it's not. Do you think that the other options are a lot better? The DA, the EFF, the MK, are these better options, that South Africans maybe are considering?
Look, South Africans are torn between these parties. But if you look at the manifestos of these organizations, in my view, the organization's manifesto or the manifesto of an organization that is progressive and leans towards creation of jobs and has stipulated in clear terms the targets of how are they going to create these jobs. In my view, that organization will be the EFF. The EFF came with a very different manifesto in these particular elections. And this manifesto, for any left progressives like ourselves in the trade union movement, it is actually what would have been promising. But of course, people went to choose other parties in addition to this. They went for the DA, they went for MK. But the desperation of the South African masses leans upon issues of governance. So mostly, they may not have looked at what are the clear policy measures that these organizations are going to put forward. What they may have looked at is what kind of a party would give us a clean government. And that is the reason why, in my view, I think that they would have, of course, still gave their vote to the DA, the Democratic Alliance, even though it has become quite clear over time now that it is leaning more towards white conservatism and it's more market liberalist. But of course, they are not looking at those particular types of policy aspects. They are looking at whether this particular organization can give us.
All right.
Of course, those radical blacks are looking at MK to think that MK can actually radicalize the economy, not radicalize in a sense of changing ownership structure, but merely ensuring that there is black ownership that is increasing in the economy.
So, Trevor, we're hoping to see that the Parliament will meet in the next 2 weeks. Is that confirmed that there's going to be a meeting within the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, they are obligated by the Constitution to constitute a government in 2 weeks. That is 14 days.
And are we looking to see any coalitions maybe with these latest developments? I mean, this will be the first time that the ANC is losing its parliamentary majority since 1994. So are we looking to see any coalitions maybe?
We're looking at three possibilities. One, coalition. Two, we call a government, a minority government, where political parties come and vote for the person who has the highest voting in that particular list. Or we are looking for a government of national unity. So most likely we are to emerge with a coalition.
All right. Thank you very much, Trevor Shaku, for joining us. We're keeping up with South Africa. Within the next 2 weeks, we hope to have you again so we can have some final updates regarding the elections. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you very much for joining us today on Breakfast Central. We'll be back again tomorrow. The strike similarly has commenced by the organized labor. We'll see how that eventually plays out and what that will mean for Nigeria's economy. We'll see if if the government will come back to the negotiation table. We'll be back tomorrow, but we have our news bulletin coming up shortly. I am Olive MOD.
And of course, the news reports also say that the NLC strike may have led to the shutting down of Nigeria's national grid. So there's, seems to be electricity outage across the country. I made stew yesterday. Just wanted to have a quick appeal to the NLC. Please, I put stew in the freezer.
I have offensala in the freezer
yes,
to have mercy
on help us, please.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Lahao Wowo in Bini terms. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
I am Osaugi Ogbon.